into another episode of the Goal Line Stand podcast. This is Jackson Caudill. That is Coby Reed coming to you live. And we are talking Big 12 football today and a little realignment. I know everybody's sick of a little conference realignment, but we got to talk about it a little bit. But first of all, Coby, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good, brother. We got what? 3 more Saturdays till college football? 2 more, actually.
Now, well, yeah, if you count week 0 does count, for Notre Dame and Navy fans. That'll be the main game that day, and Vanderbilt, Hawaii, reliving the classic 0 rivalry will continue. So we're looking forward to that. But like I said, today is Big 12 day. The last time we're getting Texas and Oklahoma in the Big 12. But let's start with a conference that has existed for over 100 years, but is pretty much dying out, and that is the Pac-12. Since we last met, Oregon and Washington are taking their talents to the Big 10. Arizona State, and Utah are going to the Big 12, which leaves Washington State, Oregon State, Cal, and Stanford kind of hanging in the wind. Now, there have been discussions of Cal and Stanford joining the ACC. Those kind of hit a roadblock on Friday when it was reported that North Carolina, NC State, Clemson, and Florida State opposed them joining. You need one more vote to get in, and as weird as it is, Notre Dame does have a vote, even though they're not a football member. So do with that what you will. But I kind of hate seeing what's going on right now. The Pac-12 has been around obviously for a long time. I grew up with it. It really died last year when USC, UCLA left, but there was some hope of getting a deal done. It didn't happen. Any thoughts on this before we really dig into the Big 12 and a conference that is benefiting from this?
I mean, I hate it. I mean, we talked about it the last couple shows. It just feels like we're seeing tradition die right in front of our faces. Like college football, everything we loved about it growing up. Because, like, the immediate thing I thought about with this is what does that do for things like the Rose Bowl? I mean, I understand the BCS era is gone. The Rose Bowl hasn't technically been what it's supposed to be. But, like, now it's really not going to be the same anymore. You're not going to have that premier Pac-12 team that just doesn't make the playoff or something like that. They're not going to be playing a Big Ten team. Like, I just think about that kind of stuff. The traditions are really falling out. But as far as playing football, you're seeing a lot of teams go to a lot more conferences. So hopefully that brings a little bit more parity to the sport. Hopefully it makes conferences a little bit more challenging outside of the SEC just beating each other up every year. So there's pros and cons to it all. But overall, I mean, I hate what it's doing to the sport right now.
And it should be noted that Oregon and Washington are going there at a reduced revenue rate. They're only going to get $30 million per school until the next Big Ten deal comes up, I think, in 2030. So that is an interesting note. And who knows what's going to happen with those other 4 schools. I hate we might not get Washington State anymore. No more Apple Cup or Oregon State. 2 rivalries that have been really fun. Like you said, I hate it too. It sucks in my opinion. We're seeing college football change before our eyes, and I'm not a big fan of it. But we won't spend too much time on realignment today. That's kind of dominant. I want to get back to just talking ball, and that's what we're going to do today. And one of the most interesting conferences, I think, this year, 4 new additions to the Big 12 this year: UCF, Cincinnati, Houston, and BYU coming in. BYU has been playing Power 5 opponents seemingly every year, and they're doing pretty well against it. UCF, of course, has been one of the most prominent group of 5 teams, and if you ask some people, they won the national championship in 2017.
I don't want to hear it.
Since Cincinnati playoff and played your Alabama Crimson Tide. And Houston has been a solid team. They don't quite, they came in last year as the group of 5 favorite last year. I think me and you were both a little more down on them than most people were, and they were okay, but they're undergoing a lot of change this year. And that's kind of where I want to start, at the bottom of the conference, and I'll start with Cincinnati. Luke Fickell gone to Wisconsin, and I think he's leaving probably at the right time. It was a little shocking that he took the Wisconsin job of all jobs, but Big Ten money talks. But they went and hired Louisville Scott Satterfield, which was an interesting choice, I think. Former Florida quarterback Emory Jones seems like he's going to be the starter there. They're losing a lot of talent just from these past few years. It's not just the Desmond Ridder, Alec Pierce, Sauce Gardner area. That team last year was pretty talented too. You lose a linebacker in Ivan Pace, who had a lot of tackles and is playing in the league now. And you have a win total set at 5.5. And I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, I'm going under on this. I think this team is going to be in for a rough transition. You start the year with Eastern Kentucky. You go to Pitt, I think that's a loss. You get Miami, Ohio. Even if you're 2-1 in that stretch, you have Oklahoma at BYU, a bye week, Iowa State, Baylor at Oklahoma State, UCF at Houston, at West Virginia, and you finish up with Kansas. Now, there's not a lot of those I can say are clearly losses, but they're going to be underdogs in most games they play this year.
Yeah.
How you feel about Cincinnati or where you had them in your order?
Yeah, definitely had them at the bottom of the barrel. I just don't expect much. I don't, like you said, that era of them having a bunch of good NFL talent on that team, it's kind of gone. They're kind of just in uncharted territory there. I don't know how much faith we can put in Emory Jones at this point. If he couldn't figure out with the quarterback guru, Dan Mullen, I don't know what other coach could develop him enough to be successful at this level right now. With that being said, I just don't. Even if he does figure it out, I don't think he has the talent around him for them to be able to make a stretch in the Big 12, especially in their first year under a first-year head coach. Just seems like they got a lot against them right now. I'm definitely going to take the under.
Yeah, and I don't know. I'll say this: sometimes it's never a good thing when a coach leaves a job and that program's happy about it. Like Louisville fans were kind of over Scott Satterfield. I've kind of defended him. I think he's a good football coach, going back to his days at App State. But I don't know how excited Cincinnati. I don't know the meter on their excitement level of him coming in, but I just don't see them making a bowl game. I think they're going to be at the bottom of the Big 12 this year, and a team that was, a couple of years ago were picked as playoff dark horses, and they played in the Big 12 title game just a few years ago. My number 13 team is Iowa State. They've been in the news for all the wrong reasons here lately. Kids being suspended for gambling. We're not going to get into all that, but they lose their top receiver, Aiden Hutchinson. This team has not really been that good on offense anyway, even when they had studs like Breece Hall and Brock Purdy on the team. Defensively, you can always count on Matt Campbell being solid, but man, the talent level on this team is just I just don't see it there. And last year they were an underrated team, and it was you never feel good about doubting a Matt Campbell coach team going into it, but this program just does not have a lot of momentum around it. You start the year with Northern Iowa. That's probably a win, but I don't think they're going to beat Iowa. I don't even think that game's going to be close right now, which of course means Iowa State's going to win it. But they go at Ohio. I'll say this: they better be careful that week. Ohio is one of the favorites to win the MAC, and they have a very, very good quarterback. I don't know that Ohio will win that game. Iowa State better be careful going into that game. Then Oklahoma State at Oklahoma, TCU at Cincinnati, bye week at Baylor, Kansas at BYU, Texas, and at Kansas State. Win total set at 5.5. Give me the under on that all day.
Yeah, give me the under. I mean, even before all the suspensions and all the other allegations and stuff going on, their offense wasn't nothing to be thrilled about going into this season. The defense, they're always going to be solid defensively. However, even if they don't have the offense, it's not going to make a lick of difference because you got to outscore somebody. The name of the game has changed. It's not about stopping teams anymore. It's about can you outscore somebody. Defense isn't as important, so to speak, for lack of a better term. But with their offensive struggles and these suspensions, I don't see them winning probably more than 3 games. So I'll definitely take the under.
Yeah, if you can get this at 5.5, take that under.
Yeah.
Another team that is the lowest win total, or tied for the lowest win total, and these are all on Caesar Sportsbook, by the way. Houston, my projected number 12 team, and one of the newcomers as well, and that'll kind of be a theme. It's always tough for teams leveling up in play, and that's what you're doing here. Like the AAC has been a good conference, but now you're playing Power 5 opponents every week. You don't get Tulsa, who has been good for a couple times in the past, but you don't get some of the bottom feeders in the AAC. Navy's been a real issue the past few years. Like you're leveling up in play, and then when you're Houston and you're losing a lot of talent off last year's team, Clayton Tune going at quarterback, you lose your offensive coordinator to Miami, losing. They've been really good on the defensive line the past few seasons. Now they lose a lot. You lose Tank Dell, who he was on my college fantasy team last year, and that man just bailed me out week in and week out. Like he was really good. He's on the Houston Texans now. Over under is set at 4.5, and I get 4.5 is kind of low, but I don't know what games they're supposed to be favored in.
Name their schedule real quick and name me 5 winnable games for them.
Yeah, let me get it pulled up real quick, and it's excellent podcasting. They might start off the year with a loss. They play UTSA week 1. Like that could be a loss.
That could very well be a loss.
That was a fantastic game last year. I know me and you've talked about it before. Week 1 last year, that was an excellent game. Then you play at Rice. JT Daniels is set to start his 18th year in college, so they'll probably win that game. But TCU at home, the new addition to the FBS, Sam Houston State, is coming up from the FCS level. They'll probably win that game, but I'll say that's a team that's been competing for FCS national championships. Like, they'll be excited to play that game too. And then you start at Texas Tech, an early bye week, West Virginia at home, Texas at home, at Kansas State, at Baylor, Cincinnati, Oklahoma State, and at UCF. They'll probably be favored against Cincinnati at home, maybe against West Virginia at home.
I would say that West Virginia might be the only pick.
Sam Houston and Rice. Man, I
don't see 5 wins there.
No, like, is Dana Holgorsen coaching this team in 2024? Because I think
I'm not sure. I'm not sure, but also with all this conference realignment stuff, if they're going to make a coaching change, it needs to go ahead and be early on. That way they can get their feet cemented in this new conference. Because if he's not gone after this year and they decide to keep him, you don't want to keep dragging it out. You know what I'm saying? So I think if he doesn't get something successful going this year, I think he's definitely out the door.
I won't expand on this too much, but I've heard this other places. Houston head coach Garrett Riley.
Imagine.
Yeah, imagine that. Another coach that's on the hot seat, and we're just going to move on from Houston quickly. Another coach on the hot seat now for my number 11 team is West Virginia. Poor old Neil Brown. This feels like a lame duck year. Their over-under win total is at 5.5, and they do not have an easy start to the season. They got a prime-time matchup with future Big Ten champion Penn State. So have fun with that. On the road, too. That's going to be a 7:30 kickoff on NBC. You do get Duquesne, which should be a win. They also play Pitt non-conference. Like, they have non-conference games against Pitt and Penn State. Like, I don't know why they're doing that, but whatever. Like, I do like West Virginia and Pitt, the backyard brawl, but still, like, it's when you're trying to – West Virginia's had a hard enough time winning in the Big 12. I just think making your non-conference schedule hard is just icing on the cake. Yeah. Texas Tech in Morgantown, at TCU, bye week, at Houston, Oklahoma State, at UCF, BYU, at Oklahoma, Cincinnati, and Baylor. You do get away with not having to play Texas, but still, I don't love the quarterback situation. I actually think their offensive line is pretty good. Like, I think they could have a couple of guys make the All Big 12 team. The defense, they've just lost so many guys to the transfer portal the past few years. Maybe they can just run the ball and beat up on some of these lower teams in here, that some of the newcomers, and I think that's true. But I'll say give me the under on 5.5. Somebody's got to lose games in the Big 12, and I just think West Virginia's going to take too many L's this year, and I doubt Neil Brown's a coach next year.
Yeah, they've had a lot of roster turnover, and it's not in a good way. They haven't really improved at many positions. They've lost a lot of talent, especially defensively. I feel like they're just going to be a punching bag for the Big 12 again this year. I don't see them going bowling. I definitely don't see them getting more than 5 wins this season. I'm definitely taking the under on that.
Yeah, I mean, like, Duquesne is probably a win. I would favor them against Houston and Cincinnati. Like, I could give you 3 wins there, and it's really hard for me to find wins elsewhere. Like, it really is. Like, I can get you to 3. Theirs is at 5.5. I can't get you 6 wins on that schedule. Like, that's too hard of a climb. I've been saying under for every team so far. You want me to give you an over? You need to be hitting.
Let me hear it.
4.5 on BYU. That is insanity to me.
Yeah.
BYU, unlike these other guys, they've been playing Power 5 opponents each and every year. Yes, they're going through a little bit of a quarterback change with Jaron Hall to the NFL. BYU is going to have one of the 3 best offensive lines in the Big 12 already. And I might put them number 2 behind Texas. Like, their offensive line is really good. They have NFL talent up front. They're going to run the ball really well, and I know what I'm going to get out of that defense. I know it's lagged a little bit the past couple of years, but I really think they're going to see an uptick in it. 4.5 to me is just absolutely insane. They have a real home field advantage too. Like, Provo is not an easy place to play at all. Now, the schedule is not the easiest. They should start off with 2 wins against Sam Houston and Southern Utah.
Yeah.
At Arkansas is probably a loss. Like that. Although I'm not high on Arkansas this year, I just don't see them going on the road in SEC country getting that win. At Kansas, winnable game. Cincinnati, winnable game. That could be 4. They could be 4-1 by their bye week, and then things do get tougher. At TCU, Texas Tech, at Texas. That's the defining stretch of the season. I think it's going to be tough to win one of those games. But even if you don't, you get West Virginia, Iowa State, Oklahoma, and Oklahoma State to finish the year. Like I said, they can start 4-1, and then you've still got games against West Virginia and Iowa State to get that over.
Yeah.
Over all day on BYU.
Yeah, give me the over. Like you said, this BYU team, they've been battle-tested over the last couple of years. They've played some very competent teams. Even last year, they had a big game against Oregon, even though it didn't go exactly how we thought it was because BYU had a lot of momentum going into that game. They've still faced top-tier talent in the Power 5 league level, whatever you want to call it. I think 4.5 is extremely low for them. I don't know who's making these odds, but that's a given right there. Give me the over on that. I think they do go bowling in their first year in the Big 12.
Yep. And I think they're a team, once Texas and Oklahoma leave, BYU could get to the top.
They could really step up. Yeah.
They need to recruit well, and they're going to have to figure out, get some stability at quarterback because really since Zach Wilson left, like Blake Shapen or Jaron Hall, excuse me, we'll get to Blake Shapen in a minute, but Jaron Hall, he showed flashes at times, but I really feel like the wide receivers and some of the playmakers let him down a little bit. I'm interested to see how they get better in that area. I think this team goes bowling this year.
Yeah.
Let's hit the other team that's coming in, that one of the newcomers, UCF, with a win total at 6.5. Look, Gus Malzahn, they're on fire recruiting. They've been getting a lot of talent out of the state of Georgia. John Reese Plumlee is back, although I think he's probably more of an athlete, I would say, than
he's a Swiss Army knife kind of guy.
Yeah, he is perfectly fine for the Gus Malzahn offense. Like,
definitely,
he's more athletic, I think, than Nick Marshall. Personally, I think Nick Marshall may be better.
He's like an upgraded version of Sean White. You remember that?
Yeah. And I'm sure you saw the cool video they had when he was going from spring practice and then switching uniforms and playing baseball that same night for UCF. I don't know if it's that, but heck of an athlete. Their win total set at 6.5. I'll go over slightly. I don't think they're winning 8 or 9 games. I think 7-5 is probably where this team winds up more often than not. And they should start the season strong. Like Kent State at Boise will be a little tough. Like that's a long road trip.
Yeah.
Villanova at home, that's a win. At Kansas State, Baylor, at Kansas, bye week. At Oklahoma, West Virginia, at Cincinnati, Oklahoma, at Texas Tech, and Houston. So you get to play Houston, Cincinnati, West Virginia. They can win all 3 of those games. Villanova and Kent State are 2 more wins I think they should have. That's 5. I'll be honest, getting to 7 is not going to be easy, but I do trust Malzahn, and I think out of the teams that are coming out, I think they're the most talented. I think BYU is the most battle-tested in terms of who they played, but I think UCF probably has the most high-end talent.
They probably got the better roster out of those teams.
Although they have lost some key contributors. Like Devontae Brown was probably their best corner last year. He's on Miami now. So they've lost some guys too. Any real thoughts on UCF?
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think Gus Malzahn is the best coach coming in out of those Group of 5 teams joining the Big 12?
He's the most accomplished. I would honestly think Kalani Sitake's a better coach, though, if you made me pick one.
Yeah, I like Gus Malzahn. I like the system he's established at UCF. I honestly think their system fits into that Big 12 mold. I think that they can put up a lot of points offensively. Like you said, I think they definitely have probably one of the better rosters of those teams that are joining the Big 12. So if you're going to compete against the likes of an Oklahoma or somebody like that, I think their roster is better fit for that. But like we said about BYU, I don't think they're as battle-tested. But UCF always finds a way to get momentum going through the season, and I think they can really pull something off this year. 6.5 is going to be tough, but I think they can pull off a 7-5 season. If not, I don't see them getting any less than 6 wins. I think they do go bowling.
It's not something I would bet. Like I would, for the purpose of the show, I'm picking over.
Yeah.
I would not touch that though, because I think 6-6 and 7-5. I don't think they'll finish worse than that, but I don't think they're going like 9-3 either.
They
I
would
think
have to steal a game against a Kansas or somebody like that to be able to pull that off.
Speaking of Kansas, win total set at
American
6.
team,
This
baby.
is what this podcast has been building towards. They were so much fun last year. I don't care
Yeah.
that they made a bowl game for the first time since 2008.
Yeah.
That's big news in Kansas, and like
They were like undefeated throughout the first 5 weeks or something like that.
They had college game day there for the TCU
Yes.
game. Remember how big that TCU game was? And it
was a great game. It was a fantastic game.
Yeah, like think about it. Like if Jalen Daniels doesn't get hurt, this team could win 8 or 9 games. Now, we need to discuss something, and it is that defense, because that's the only reason I'm not going all in on the Jayhawks. For the purpose of this show, I will pick over, but I think a push is probably more likely. I think 6-6 is probably where you're going to wind up. Now, Coby Bryant is a fantastic corner. Me and you talked about him on our Top DBs show earlier this summer. The rest of this defense, like the run defense, like it's not good at all. Like they're at the bottom half of the country, nearly every statistical category. But while I think Texas probably has the best and most talented offense in the Big 12, give me Kansas for number 2. Jalen Daniels back. The running game should be solid once again. You get your top receivers back, and the offensive line, it's back. Like, and I think they have a well coached offense. Like they motion guys and use so much misdirection to try to set things up and get the matchups that they want. Like it's fascinating, like to just go study and watch. Like obviously Kansas is not the most talented. They're maybe the they're the least talented team in the Big 12. The way they're coached, though, is just fantastic. And look, that Illinois game in week 2, that Friday, that is going to say a whole bunch. Like, if they win that game, I would feel good about them getting to a bowl game, but it's going to be an uphill battle if they lose it. Should start with a win against Missouri State. Illinois is at home, and they have a lot of their tougher games at home, which is why I kind of like the over a little bit. At Nevada, I'm telling you all, Nevada is going to be one of the 5 worst teams in the country this year. Like, any unders you can take on them, take it. Like, they're terrible. BYU at home, I think that's a toss-up. They're going to probably lose at Texas. UCF at home is a toss-up. At Oklahoma State, probably a loss. Like, I do have a lot of respect for Mike Gundy and that program. Like, at home, I think Oklahoma State wins. Bye week, Oklahoma at home, and the audacity for them to schedule that as their homecoming game is awesome.
That's bold, bro.
They scored points on Oklahoma last year. Now, they couldn't stop them worth anything, but, I have no idea what Oklahoma looks like at that point in the season. We'll get to them in a minute. Iowa State, very winnable game. Texas Tech at home, they'll probably be underdogs, but they can win that game. Kansas State at home is probably a loss, and then at Cincinnati. I think it's going to be tough, but I'll say a push, and 6-6 is most likely. But just for the purpose of this show, I'll go over for our boys.
Listen, they're America's team. We're going to take the over. We got the utmost faith in the Jayhawks. That offense, I think you hit the nail on the head. Schematically, what they do offensively, it's very fun to watch, but also, like, it's going to give a lot of defensive fits, especially in the Big 12. I think that they can put up a lot of points. I see them averaging at least about 35 points a game, if not more. But like you said, defensively, we're talking about like a North Carolina, if not worse, level defense. But like we said about North Carolina, it can't get much worse. If they can put together even a top 75, top 80 defense, I think they have the offense to really, really be good this year. I'm going to smash on the over just because I do got faith in them. I got faith in the culture they've established there, and I like their offensive weapons. But it is still Kansas. They're still building up. They're still, like, their ceiling is high, but they're still climbing there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, they're just watch them play. Like, they're fun, and everybody should be rooting for them. If you're rooting against Kansas, I don't know what your problem is. But moving on to a team I cannot figure out for the life of me is Oklahoma State. Win total at 6.5. And I'm
most unpredictable team in all of college football.
Whenever I'm high on this team, they come out and they don't do anything. I've picked this team to go to the playoff multiple times, and it's been 2 of the black marks of my storied career. Like, and anytime I underrate them, they come out and they win like 9 games. Look, they're like the Louisville of the Big 12. Their schedule, like, I'm going to read it to you here. It's not hard at all. And if you told me that Oklahoma State is in the Big 12 title game just based on their schedule. I don't think it's crazy.
Yeah.
Like, okay, they start off with Central Arkansas. That's a win. At Arizona State, that's a win. Like that.
Yeah.
We'll get to Pac-12 next week, but Kenny Dillingham, it's going to take a little bit to build that back up. I don't know who's going to start at quarterback there. Maybe it's Jaden Rashada. Who knows? South Alabama, I'll say this. They better be careful here because South Alabama could win the Sun Belt. But it's
a good program.
They're a really good program. I think that's a win. At Iowa State, that's a win. Bye week. Kansas State at home, that's probably – they're going to be underdogs in that game, but they get it at home. They get that game at home. Kansas at home, that might be a win. At West Virginia, Cincinnati. They have to go – they get Oklahoma at home. Now, Oklahoma always finds a way to beat Oklahoma State. Like, there's the saying, Oklahoma wins Bedlam by a little or they win it by a lot. Like, Mike Gundy has not had a lot of success against Oklahoma. I'll say this, though. Oklahoma State's going to be fired up about that game because this is the last Bedlam game we may ever get, ever. And I know Mike Gundy's pissed off about losing that game, just like I am. That game's at home. I think he could have something for Oklahoma. At UCF, at Houston, BYU. They don't play Texas, and they don't play TCU. So, and they don't play Texas Tech either. Like, that's again, I think a good comparison for them is Louisville. Like, I don't know that they're one of the most talented teams in the conference, but their schedule, man, it really could do them favors. Do you remember Alan Bowman at Texas Tech, by the way? Because he transferred to Michigan. He quickly found out that quarterback room's kind of talented. He's back at Oklahoma State now. It feels like he's been in college for about 8 years. Yeah, and I might not be wrong, but he's probably going to be the quarterback this year. They did lose some.
Now, is he an upgrade from Spencer Sanders though? A guy that was in that system for a long time.
I think it's. I think they even each other out. I never thought Spencer Sanders was that good. I never. I thought he was a pretty solid college quarterback, but he was a turnover machine, and I don't even know if he's going to get on the field at Ole Miss. That was a baffling decision to me. But any thoughts on the Cowboys? I think I feel the same as I feel about BYU 4.5. Give me this over all day long, even though I don't know how good this team actually is.
Just off that schedule alone, give me the over. But like you said, there's such a wild card each and every year. As soon as you think they're going to be something, they lay an egg. And then as soon as you doubt them, they can rattle off a 10-win season. So I'm not going to have much to say as far as predictions for Oklahoma State. But I do think they are going to have a lot of momentum. They're going to try to leave a bad taste in the mouth of a team like Oklahoma who's leaving for the SEC next year. I think they're really going to have a lot of momentum going into the season. So give me the over. I think they can rattle off probably a 9-win season at the least.
If Mike Gundy beats Oklahoma in that last Bedlam game, that post-game press conference is going to be something. It's going to be something, and everybody needs to be paying attention to it. But we'll transition to a team I think they're getting a lot of love, and I think they're getting a little too much love. Their over-under win total set at 7.5. That is Joey McGuire's Texas Tech Red Raiders. And Tyler Shuck is back at quarterback. You want to know a fun stat?
Let me hear it.
Game he started at Texas Tech, he's won. Now, the problem is he's only started 8 games there because he can't stay healthy.
Yeah.
Donovan Smith transferred to Houston. I thought Donovan Smith was a little overrated. He has some talent, but I didn't think people I thought gave him a little too much credit.
Yeah.
A lot of people think this is I saw them get mentioned as a dark horse playoff contender in this year's TCU. We need to pump the brakes on that a little bit. Now, I think this team's good. I really do think this team will be pretty good.
Everybody's just wishing for that Cinderella TCU type stuff.
And Shuck is a good quarterback. I love what Joey McGuire's done out there at Texas Tech. He's a perfect fit for that program. They're going to play hard. You lose a top 10 pick on defense, though. And how often does Texas Tech have top 10 picks on the defensive side of the ball? Like, it's not often. Man, we'll talk about our best non-conference games here in a little bit. They get Oregon at home. That's going to be something for both of those teams. If they can win that game, maybe they can jumpstart that into something else. But they do start the season at Wyoming. Why they're going to Laramie, Wyoming, I don't know. But they are. Then they get Oregon at home. Tarleton State, that's a win. At West Virginia, Houston, at Baylor, Kansas State, at BYU. They get a late bye week, and then they finish the year up TCU, at Kansas State, UCF, and at Texas. One of the reasons I think they're a little overrated is they got lucky in a lot of games last year. Like, they should not have won that Texas game, and they just won a lot of games in some weird fashion. But, again, I'll probably would lean under at 7.5. I just don't know that they got that big leap in them. I don't know. What are your thoughts on the Red Raiders going into 2023?
They're one of those teams you just really don't want to play. Like, it's hard to put high expectations on them, but also you can't ever count them out because they can turn around and beat your favorite team on any given Saturday. That's just how they play football. I like it. I like the culture they've established there. I like them as a program. Like you said, they defensively they lost some guys and they lost a top 10 level guy last year through the draft. But with that being said, it is the Big 12. Nobody is defensive heavy in the Big 12. As long as you can put up points, you're going to have a chance. As far as 7.5, I'm going to go on a wild card. Give me the over. I can see them getting 8 wins, but that's about where that ceiling goes for me.
You're not buying some of the bigger hype there?
No, I don't think they can be a TCU Cinderella type team. I don't see that. All the cards just happen to fall right for TCU. It's hard to do that. But I do think that they can get 8 wins, maybe 9 if they execute and show a little bit of defense, but I don't see it being much better than that.
Yeah. Again, that Texas Tech Oregon game is fascinating.
That's gonna be a fun game to watch.
Yeah. From most overrated to most underrated, Dave Aranda and the Baylor Bears, they just won the conference 2 years ago, and they were a couple of funky bounces away from making a playoff appearance. They were getting a lot of love last year. I remember Kirk Herbstreit picked Baylor to go to the playoff last year, and I thought that was a little much. I was not on the train last year. I'm back on it this year at 7. Look, I think Blake Shapen at quarterback, he is the difference maker. Like, if they can get consistent production out of him, I really think this team has – I just trust him to play good defense under Dave Aranda. And to me, that's why I put so much on Shapen. Look, their schedule, Texas State opener, that should be a win. Another fascinating Week 2 game. They welcome the 2-time defending Pac-12 champ Utah Utes to Waco. And Utah is just going to be fresh off playing Florida the week before. Cam Rising's health is a little uncertain heading into the season, at least from the latest of what I read. So what a tough 2 games for Utah to open the season up. But we'll talk about them next week. But Long Island at home, Texas and Waco. First road game is actually at UCF. Then they get Texas Tech at home, bye week at Cincinnati, Iowa State, Houston, at Kansas State, at TCU, West Virginia. I think the schedule plays out favorably.
Yeah.
Getting some of these tougher games at home, like Texas at home, Texas Tech at home. Now, the at Kansas State, at TCU part's tough, but give me the over on Baylor. I wish I could get it at 6.5, but like if at 7, I'll say I'll push to the over, even though I do think 7 and 5 is probably where they finish. But to me, I think Baylor should be getting just as much love as Texas Tech.
Yeah, Baylor, I would go as far to say they have a top 3 head coach in the Big 12. I love Dave Aranda. He's just one of those guys you want to play for. He can rally the troops. He can get you a win on any given Saturday. Like you said, I think the defense is probably going to be one of the better defenses in the conference this year. And with Blake Shapen at quarterback, you hit the nail on the head. If he can be productive consistently, I think consistently is the big part of that. If he can put up the numbers, I can see this team having at least 8 or 9 wins and that being a mediocre season for them. I think they could definitely rattle off some wins. However, I don't see them being a Texas Tech, a TCU Cinderella type deal just yet. I don't think their roster is quite there to compete with the likes of Texas or something like that. But I can see them being a very good team this year. Give me the over.
All right. I know this is probably going to be a lengthy conversation because I think they're the most fascinating team in the Big 12 this year. Oklahoma. I've got them picked 4th, and it's mostly just because I'm scared to pick them higher. Talent-wise, they're only behind Texas in terms of roster. They lost a lot. The only game they got blown out in last year was the game against Texas, but they did the quarterback play for Oklahoma like it was very subpar. Now, if Dylan Gabriel gets hurt, they got a guy that's, I think, pretty capable.
They got a guy. You know,
Dylan Gabriel, I hope he doesn't get hurt. I don't want to see anybody get hurt, but he could legitimately not come back for Oklahoma. Like Jackson Arnold could just take over from there. I think their defense should be better. Like under Brent Venables, it should be better. Yeah. Like they recruited really well. They've added a lot of front 7 players in the transfer portal. Yeah. I just don't know how good of a coach Brent Venables is. Like their defense was horrendous last year. Like it was really bad.
Yeah.
The schedule, it's that week that they start off with Arkansas State. No disrespect to Butch Jones, but Oklahoma's winning that game. Man, another week 2 game. Week 2 is a great week for college football. They
Yep.
play SMU at home. SMU, I think, is a team that could get to the New Year's Six through the AAC. It's going to be SMU or Tulane for me. That to me is the real test. Like if Oklahoma goes out there and like squashes SMU, man, I think that really could springboard them, and I could take them a lot more seriously. But if they win, even if they win, but it's something like 48-45 or something where SMU just puts a lot of points on them, that's going to make me more nervous. Like they really need to make a statement in that game. At Tulsa, at Cincinnati, Iowa State should all be wins, and then of course the rivalry game against Texas. You get a bye week, UCF at Kansas, at Oklahoma State, West Virginia at home, at BYU, and they finish up the year on Black Friday against TCU, which is going to be a great game. Give me the under on 9.5 just slightly. I think 9-3 or 8-4 is more likely. I just cannot pick a team that went 6-6 and played terrible defense to go 10-2. I know the Big 12, like you don't have it's not like the SEC or even the Pac-12 where you got a lot of playoff contenders, but like TCU, Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, they could all beat Oklahoma. I know I don't think they play Texas Tech, but still, like they could lose some of those games. And if their defense isn't better, give me the under.
Let's go ahead and knock out my biggest question about the Big 12. What would you consider success for Brent Venables in year 2?
I think hitting the over and going to the Big 12 title game. Like to me, even if they go 8-4,
even in year 2,
that's disappointing. Like this wasn't I get they lost Caleb Williams and some talented players. This was not a complete rebuild though. This wasn't like he walked into a tire fire. Like it's Oklahoma. Like the two most consistent programs pretty much all time is Oklahoma and Ohio State. I'm not saying they're the two best jobs, but last year was the worst Oklahoma team I've ever seen by far. And Ohio State, the only time I can remember them having a bad season is the one year they had Luke Fickell as the interim coach and they went 6-6.
Yeah.
Like Oklahoma is just a model of consistency. I get those guys left, but Brent Venables, like they shouldn't have been that bad last year. I do think they showed a little something. Like they played Florida State pretty well in that game.
Yeah.
I just think the competition's about to get a whole lot tougher. Like it's about to get a whole lot tougher going to the SEC. I really think to feel confident about him being the head coach for them going to the SEC, they need to win 10 games and make the Big 12 title game. Because like I said, it's not like this conference is loaded. There's some fun teams in here. I would stop short of calling any of these teams really, really good.
Yeah. I was going to say probably a 10-win season. They don't necessarily have to win the conference, but they need to get double-digit wins this year, especially going into the SEC. They need to have as much momentum as they can because they're probably not even the best team going into the SEC next year. It's probably Texas if we're looking at it objectively. But 10 wins for them would be good. However, I just don't see that happening this year. Last year, I'm going to give Brent Venables the benefit of the doubt. Lincoln Riley left him not with scraps, but he didn't leave him with the best situation. The defense under Lincoln Riley already wasn't good, and I think Brent Venables is a defensive genius. I think he can pull off a lot of stuff, but that Oklahoma defense already didn't have the talent that it needed to, and then you take a bunch of the offense with Lincoln Riley to USC. I'm going to give Brent Venables the benefit of the doubt. I think they can get 9 wins. I don't think they can get 10, but I'm really interested to see what that defense looks like this year. And like we said, if it comes down to it and Dylan Gabriel loses his job, that might be an upgrade for Oklahoma this year. That could really springboard them into rattling off a bunch of wins. So give me the under, but that's not to say that I think they're going to be a bad team this year. I think they will be improved, but it's not going to be a 10 win. I don't think they're going to be a conference contender type deal.
Yep. I'll take the under, but I could see them being a much improved team and making the title game.
Yeah.
All right. A few more teams here as we're counting down this Big 12. Let's talk about the team. They didn't win the conference, but they made the national championship game. So I think they were happy with how last season went. TCU's over-under set on 7.5. And even before I dig into the schedule, I'm going over on this.
You got to smash that over. You have to.
They return a pretty good bit on defense. They lost a little bit in the secondary, but their front seven, I think, only get better.
Their transfer portal additions, especially offensively, I think they replaced a pretty good amount of talent, to be honest with you.
People forget Chandler Morris beat Max Duggan out to start the year. He got hurt, and then Max Duggan came in, but Chandler Morris is the talented quarterback. I'm really I want to see Trey Sanders succeed at some
I
level,
want to see him do good so bad, man.
and JoJo Earl, another
Yeah.
Tommy Brockmeyer, he transferred to TCU as well, I believe.
Tommy
So.
Brockermeyer. So they got like that's 2 out of 3 kids from Bama that were former 5-stars that still have a lot of talent and a lot of gas in the tank. Tommy Brockermeyer, he didn't get a lot of work in at Bama, so he can get his feet wet for the first time. And Trey Sanders, I think he's finally healthy. He had that bad car wreck a couple years ago when he was at Bama. I think he's finally healthy and has something to prove. And then JoJo Earl, he's one of those type guys that can be real shifty in the slot, can be some in the return game. That transfer portal class they brought in, I think they might have improved offensively, to be honest with you.
Yeah, because I loved what Max Duggan did last year, but he had his limitations, and you saw it in the Georgia game. You saw it at times throughout the year, but 7.5 is just way too low, man.
Yeah.
Obviously, they start the year off against Colorado. I have no idea what to expect from Colorado. We're going to talk about them more next week, but I think that they should win that game. You get Nichols at home at Houston. Again, they play SMU too, and I know it's going to be an opportunity for SMU. If SMU's coming off a win against Oklahoma, that could be really, really interesting game. And of course, Sonny Dykes coached at SMU.
Yep.
West Virginia at Iowa State, BYU, those are all winnable games. The Big 12 title game rematch at Kansas State, bye week at Texas Tech. Then they finish off the year with a tough 3-game stretch, Texas, Baylor, and at Oklahoma. And you throw Texas Tech in there. That 4-game stretch after the bye week is really going to tell us whether TCU is a Big 12 title contender, and I think they are. I'm not picking them to go to the title game again. I think they're going to be right in the thick of things again. Hammer the over on TCU.
I'm going to take that over, but I do see them getting about 9 wins this year. Let me ask you this, though. When Texas and OU leave for the SEC, is Texas your favorite to really take control of that conference?
Yes, I think TCU is going to take. I think they're going to be the best.
TCU
best suited to do that, and they have a proven coach, Sonny Dykes. Offensively, I trust them year in and year out. You're in a great recruiting area. I think they can. They obviously have done the transfer portal pretty well.
Yeah,
I like where they're going. All right, 2 more teams left. I'm picking this team. I picked them last year to get to the Big 12 title game. I thought they were getting a little too much love at first, but I just think the team's really good, and I think they found an upgrade at quarterback throughout the season. The reigning Big 12 champion, Kansas State Wildcats, 7.5. Again, I really like the over here.
Yep.
Losing Deuce Vaughn that hurts, and again, he was making plays for the Cowboys in yesterday's preseason game. They return a lot on the offensive line. They're going to be really good on defense again, and I think they have capable playmakers on the outside. And I really think if Will Howard starts here at quarterback, I think they lost some games because of Adrian Martinez. Not that he didn't do some good things for them last year.
He had games last year where he really
Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And he rushed for like 200-something yards in that game, I think.
Yeah.
Will Howard to me was he was legitimately really, really good in that game. I really like this team heading into the year. To me, if there is a dark horse playoff contender out of this conference, I really do think it's them. Now, do I think they can get to the playoff and win? No. I just think like TCU last year, I think they can win enough games and get there. And then, we saw what happened when they played Alabama. It wasn't the prettiest thing in the world. That's just a really well-coached team. I hammer the over on Kansas State. I think they start off the season with some Southeast Missouri, Troy at Missouri, UCF, and they have an early bye week at Oklahoma State, at Texas Tech, TCU, Houston at home, at Texas, Baylor, at Kansas, and Iowa State to finish off the year. I like this team to get 9 or 10 wins. I really like this team going into the year.
I do too, and I definitely think that they can make it to the Big 12 championship again. I don't think they're going to be my pick to win it, but I think overall they're one of those teams that they have the most amount of questions. So we talked about Michigan in that same aspect on our Big 10 preview. Kansas State, I mean, there's not very many questions. It's just going to come down to do they have the better guys on the field against the opponents they're facing, I think they're going to have a more consistent production at the quarterback position throughout the year going into 2023. I think they can be just as good, if not better, than last year, but we are going to have to see.
Yep. All right.
We got to talk about it.
At the end of the show, we got to talk about them, and it's going to be my biggest question too, and we'll just go off that. Is Texas back? Are the Longhorns back? I'll let you start this conversation. I've been leading some of the conversation. I want you to take Texas.
I'm going to say yes, and I think that they have the roster to do it. I think Sark. This is the most faith we've seen in a Texas coach in a very long time. I think he can get it done this year. And by get it done, I don't necessarily mean win a national championship, but I think they are very capable of making the playoffs this year. If Quinn Ewers can stay healthy, I think they definitely have the receivers. I think they have a top 3 wide receiver room in the country. I think their running game is going to be good. They've really beefed up not only their O-line, but their D-line as well. Their defense played really physical last year. I see them being just as good. I think what we're going to see with this Texas team is we're going to see the exact same thing that we're seeing from Mike Norvell and FSU, just from a different aspect. We saw Mike Norvell. You give him time, you let him access the transfer portal, and he builds a very good team. Now you give Sark some time, and instead of necessarily accessing the transfer portal, even though he did get guys like A.D. Mitchell, he's gone to high school recruiting, and he's really built up that team with some time. I think they got the roster that they could finally make a playoff game this year.
Yeah. I don't think they're back in the sense of they're going to win the national championship. They are my pick to win the Big 12.
Yes.
Offensively, they could be stupid good. Like
they could be very good.
If Ewers stays healthy, I'm interested to see how they replace Bijan. You know, when I'm looking at teams projecting throughout the season, even if they lose a really good running back, sometimes I don't know how much to give that because unfortunately running backs can be replaced. We see it in the NFL, like it can happen. But Bijan was something special. I'm interested to see how they do that. Their wide receiver room, I think, outside of Ohio State, I think is maybe the most talented in the country. LSU is probably up there as well for me, at least.
And
offensive line, yeah, Washington as well. Offensive line, I think, is really good. It's just going to be where can this defense make the most improvement? You know, they did show improvement last year. That Alabama game, they played really physical and really tough. They're going to have to do it again. I think that again they go to Bama this year, and that's going to be one of the most anticipated games of the year. They are my pick to win the Big 12. I'll stop short of trusting them to get back to the playoff. I still think they got a couple of losses in them. Probably, I just don't think they're defensively enough where I trust them to win every single game yet. And if they lose to Alabama, I just feel it's tough to trust Texas to run the table the rest of the way. But I really like this team going into this year. Unlike last year when I was telling people to pump the brakes a little bit, like 8-4 is a good season for them. And that's what they went. It was a step forward from 5-7. Now you got to take the leap from 8-4 to double-digit wins, and it's a big disappointment to me if Texas doesn't make the Big 12 title game. Like, it's a massive disappointment. Like, they have the most talented roster in the conference by far, in my opinion. They have to at least make the title game. Like, if you lose to either Oklahoma, Kansas State, or TCU in a close game, like, fine. But to me, Texas is under some pressure to really win some games this year. Which, you know, as we start to wrap up the show, we'll just kind of run down these quickly. 5 best conference games, we'll go non-conference first, actually. I think number one, we've talked about it enough. I think Texas, Alabama. I don't know what more you could really want in a non-conference game. 2 of the biggest brands in college football. It's going to be in prime time. The crowd's going to be outrageous. That's going to be a great game. We talked about Oregon and Texas Tech earlier. I know that was on your list as well. That could be a really pivotal point for either team. If Texas Tech wins, that could really give them a lot of momentum throughout the year. I had Utah and Baylor on mine as well. Like, that week 2 is just going to be a pivotal week for the Big 12 overall. SMU, Oklahoma, and I had Illinois, Kansas. I know we talked a little bit about this last week on the Big 10 preview. Illinois, I think, is a dark horse to win the Big 10 West, and me and you both like Kansas, so that offense against that defense is just going to be a fascinating matchup, I think. Do you have any more games to add? I know our lists are kind of similar. So
our lists are very similar. I think the order might be a little different, but we got the same games in there. I would also throw in, just because you have to, West Virginia and Pitt. I think you got to throw that in. Like, even though I think Pitt will win that game heavily, that's just one of those games, just out of tradition, out of respect for both programs and their history. You're going to be watching it regardless, even though you might have low expectations. But I think you hit the nail on the head. That Texas-Bama game, that could honestly determine a playoff spot right there.
Yeah. We'll be dreaming of the old Big East when we're watching West Virginia Pitt, right?
Yep.
In terms of conference games, like, when I make these lists, like, I try not to include every game that includes my pick to win the conference. Like, I can include, like, a bunch of Texas games. I do think Texas-Kansas State's my favorite game this year. And then I do have Oklahoma versus Texas, because it's the last time we'll get this as both of them members of the Big 12. I know it's going to carry over to the SEC, but I do think there's something about it being in the Big 12. I'm going to miss. I can't really pin it down, but TCU Baylor, I think, is a really fascinating game that they've played some classics over the years. Kansas State, Texas Tech. If Texas Tech wants to prove they can get to the conference title game, they got to win that game as well. And then TCU Texas. That game was kind of strange last year. TCU's defense really held Texas down. I'm kind of curious as if they can do that again. The game is not in Austin this year, so that's a really interesting matchup. Did you have any more you wanted to throw in there?
Yeah, we had all the same games there too. I would also throw in Kansas and Oklahoma. I think that would be a very interesting game to watch with a Brent Venables defense versus that Kansas offense. I think there's going to be fireworks all over the field. But yeah, I think Texas and Oklahoma, that's probably going to be my favorite game to watch. But Kansas State and Texas, that could be very interesting. Kansas State has a chance to really throw off Texas this season this year.
I think it's a Big 12 preview, Big 12 title game preview. I think those are the things that get in there. Most overrated team, I said Texas Tech. I think they're going to be good. I just don't think they're ready to make a big leap.
Overrated, I got to go Oklahoma. I think we're getting caught up in just the brand, the program, the logo. Don't get me wrong. I think they have talented people on their team. I think they have a very talented roster. However, I think they're one more year away from being able to really make some shake.
Yeah. Tough thing is I got to do it in the SEC.
Yep.
Most underrated team. I almost picked TCU, but I do think they're still gonna get some respect because they made the national title game. I don't care what happened in that game. They made it. So I'm going with Baylor in this spot. Win total's only at 7. I still think Dave Aranda is going to put out a really good defense. I think Blake Shapen is a NFL draft prospect that nobody's really talking about. Yeah. Keep an eye on that team this year. I think they could ruin somebody's season in this conference.
Most underrated team. You know who I had to go with? America's team, baby. Give me the Jayhawks. Like I said, I think if they could put together maybe a top 75 defense with that offense, I think they could really win 8 games this year. I think they could be really good.
Yeah, I'm ready for some more Jayhawks football. Man, offensive player of the year, I almost went Jalen Daniels because I truly think he's one of the best quarterbacks in the country. But I'm going with Quinn Ewers. I think the leap's coming. I think he's a first-round, top 10 talent. I think he's going to be the catalyst behind one of the best offenses in the country. Give me Ewers.
Mine was going to be between Quinn Ewers and Xavier Worthy. I do think Xavier Worthy is the top 5 wide receiver in the league this year. But with that being said, there's a lot more weapons in that one wide receiver room than they had last year. You got Isaiah Nayer coming back. You got A.D. Mitchell coming in. You got 5-star Jonte Cook in there now. I think the ball is going to be spread more evenly between that wide receiver room. So give me Quinn Ewers.
Defense player of the year. This was really tough for me, but I think one of the most underrated defense players in the entire country is Kendall Daniels, the DB at Oklahoma State. He was a second-team selection as a freshman last year.
Yeah,
I think you're going to see a bigger leap from him. He's a name that not a lot of people know, but I'm telling you, he's fantastic. He's my pick to win Big 12 Defense Player of the Year.
Got to go back to my Jayhawks. Give me Coby Bryant, not just because we have the same name, but I think he is one of the more elite defensive backs in the country this year. And if that Jayhawks defense is going to be any more improved than they were last year, I think that starts with him. He is going to be the best player on that starting 11.
So before we wrap up here, my official prediction for the Big 12 title game, I've got Texas over Kansas State, and you have?
I got Texas over Kansas State as well.
I think that's going to be a great matchup, and who knows, maybe it could be for a playoff spot.
Yep.
But that is going to wrap up our Big 12 preview. We got one more preview to go, and it's going to be a somber one. It's going to be the last Pac-12 preview we can ever give you, unfortunately. Yep. And it's not because this podcast is ending. It's because the Pac-12 is literally dying before we did. So
yep.
There you go. But we'll be back next week for that, and then it'll be time for playoff picks and our Heisman picks, favorite bets. Like the season's getting so close, and we may even have some special guests to come on this show and argue with us a little bit. But
yes, sir.
We would really appreciate it if anybody would like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Give us a follow on social media. You can catch it below. It's running on our ticker endlessly. Coby, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
I can smell it, baby. I can smell the fresh turf being put down as we speak. Teams getting ready. Stadiums getting ready. We're getting closer and closer to college football, baby.
Man, 19 days before Georgia Tech faces Louisville in their first game. Be sure to also check out any Georgia Tech news. I've been doing so many conference realignment updates, but had a scrimmage yesterday. Brent Key talked afterwards. You can get all your Georgia Tech content over at allyellowjackets.com. I got you covered over there. But like I said, like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're going to be putting out content all season long. But that is Coby Reed. I'm Jackson Caldwell, and the goal line's